Aaron and Daniel, welcome to the Let's Give a Damn podcast. So glad you're here.
Thanks for having us. It's good to be here.
You all are so busy, especially the last 9-10 months. I feel like your workload, would you agree that your workload has increased because of your voice in this conversation?
I mean, Aaron's was always crazy. Aaron's workload, I feel like, just given his job, there's never a shortage of stuff to be covering. But this, I mean, you'd agree with me that emotionally it's added an extra load of heaviness in terms of what we're dealing with every day.
For sure, like everybody. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but you've had this. I didn't know about. I'll be honest, didn't know about either of you before all of this happened, and then I'm obviously a big fan of your dad's, and you both started popping up in the months after that, and I've been paying such close attention to what you've done, how you've contributed so valuably, and so I am so honored that you would both take the time to come over from yonder Brooklyn to Manhattan, cross the river to come and spend time with me.
This is the first time we've ever been interviewed together.
I'm so excited about that.
Yeah.
I feel so honored.
So are our parents.
Yeah. I'm so excited that this gets to be the first time. Really honored. I mean, I hope this conversation. I didn't know that, but what I did, it was a very intentional ask to see if I could get both of you, because I've seen so many separate conversations happen, and you've been on his podcast, and I've seen you guys interact before, but your contributions have been so valuable, and so I'm hoping that there's some really good things that'll come out of this conversation. Two brothers that are part of a pretty incredible, I'm not saying perfect, but incredible family that has contributed so meaningfully to me and to so many. So there are ways that I would love to introduce you both, but I want you to do it because it's very multi hyphenated, all the things that you all do. So Aaron, let's start with you, and let's not get into your story yet, but how do you introduce yourself to people? What are you excited about doing that you like to tell people about?
I'm a journalist. I've been in progressive media for about 20 years, and I used to work for Democracy Now! And then Al Jazeera and a few other places. And now I'm with the Grayzone, and I co-host a podcast with Katie Halper called Useful Idiots. And I write a Substack, and I do journalism. I like it.
Amazing. Podcast is great. I also get the newsletter. Daniel, how do you introduce yourself? What are you excited about that you get to do?
First and foremost, I'm Aaron's brother. That's usually what I lead with, just to get some, either credibility or find out who I'm dealing with.
There you go.
I like to say, first and foremost, I'm a musical theater composer, lyricist, even though these days that occupies a lamentably small percentage of my time and energy, but I'm trying to get back to it. I have an MFA from Tisch in musical theater writing. It's what I'm trained in, and I still am very passionate about my shows and trying to move that art form forward. And it's just, I don't know, it feels like a core part of who I am, no matter how much it's actually happening. What else? I am the co-host of the Bad Hasbara podcast with Matt Lieb, the world's most moral podcast. That's brand new. I guess I'm an Instagram content creator, influence. I hate these words, but they seem to apply since October 7th only. I mean, that's Aaron has had a following for a long time and has a huge, long body of journalistic work. You said popping up. I started popping off on October 8th. I just took a walk with my camera and started just talking about it. And for whatever reason, that's been helpful to people. So that's a platform that I've built. I'm also what I call a mental chiropractor. I take walks with people and help them get their minds unstuck through conversation. That's a whole other thing. And then last but certainly not least, I co-wrote a book with our dad called The Myth of Normal. And we have another book that's going to come out eventually based on a workshop we've led. So I'm a published author too, I guess.
Amazing. How was that for you, kind of just doing your thing, and then October 8th, that sort of like things start changing for you? you start using this platform more? Like, do you like what you get to do online now, or does it feel it's a lot? It's a lot to make content, and now people are depending on you on a smaller scale. I know what that's like. Creating content, especially in the last 9-10 months, that has really helped people navigate these really tricky, on the one hand, not tricky waters. It's very clear what needs to happen, but these very tricky conversations. Have you enjoyed the being more in the public space, or are you hoping to not have to do that long term?
Well, one of the reasons I've always hated the term content creator is content is such a neutral, banal word. If you have a plugged toilet, you got a lot of content in there. There's just nothing about content that says anything about whether it's worthwhile.
Substantive, sure.
Context has always been more interesting to me. And I would say that I really enjoyed the first few months. I'm an introvert with a extroverted streak, or an exhibitionist streak. But ultimately, after a lot of attention, there's a part of me that wants to pull away and get back to the place where I can create from and things like that. So I think people who followed me probably noticed that during the fall, I was doing a lot of these Instagram lives and interviewing people and walks and talks and all that kind of stuff. Since the new year, which is really when I joined the Bad Hasbara podcast, which gives me a much more focused and collaborative place to quote unquote create content, but really just to have fun, riff, amplify voices that should be amplified, and provide the same service I was providing before, which is to both satirize and crystallize this very crazy-making world of Hasbara for people, try to make sense of what's going on and give them an outlet. I've done less of that, and now my output on Instagram is basically taking screenshots of my snarky tweets and then pairing it with the perfect song. So it's actually not all that demanding on my time, and I'm glad about that, because I didn't want to keep that going forever. I can't stomach my job being to keep refilling the trough of addictive, nutrient-free content, no matter what. And also
but it's not nutrient-free.
It's not nutrient-free. But
as you said, it's context. And in fact, I've never heard the term context creator before, but
I'd like to think of myself as a context creator. Yeah,
you are a context creator.
Yeah, which means I have to watch
shit.
What's that?
It's a trademark that shit.
Yeah, absolutely, context creator. Thank you. But I mean, I guess that means I have to pay attention to the context for why I'm doing it. Am I doing it just or am I doing it from a place of real inspiration and creation? All of that. I don't want to let the attention lead me. I want to let the inspiration and trust that whatever I'm doing that feels authentic is going to be the most nutritious for others.
Both of your work will continue coming up in our conversation, but I want to go back. I want to go back a bit. We're gonna in the latter half of this conversation, we'll talk about Gaza. We'll talk about the things that you all have done in the last 10 months. We'll talk about the upcoming election. It is August 6th. Kamala just picked her running mate. Which
from the window to the walls.
Yes. Yes.
How do you fill the rest of that line? Because you have to come up until the sweat drips off my balls.
Till the change runs through the halls of power.
There you go. Yeah, that was good. That was quick. I like that. I'm the lyricist over here. We'll leave it to you. So we'll talk about that, but I want to get a lot of this podcast is not just about the work that you're doing, the things that you've created, and to talk about what's happening in the world. I want to get to know how we got here is so important to me. How you became the person you became, same with you, is really important. And again, this is an honor to have two brothers sitting here. I think this is the first time I've had people that are related. I've had multiple guests at different points, but never people that are related. And you're part of a really sort of unique upbringing and family, not just because your dad is this person that is a household name that has helped, Gregory, whose conference room we're using right now, was commenting that Gabor is like a dad to so many people. We had shitty dads. And so we know that we can literally just type in YouTube Gabor Maté interview and really go to any point in that interview. And whatever we hear is this soothing, peaceful, perfect advice that we need, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's
We'd love to have that dad.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
How was
Just kidding,
well, no, he himself would say, I mean, I was thinking the same thing. You know, like the world got to get that dad and we got the more compromised version of that.
that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
Is like
More complicated version of it.
Complicated. Yeah.
I get that so deeply. I mean, as the son of these are not parallel, your dad and my dad, but as the son of, you know, a pastor and a missionary who like always presented his best face. And then we got his terrible side every single day for decades, you know, and he's a lot better now, but like he's a way different person now. But I mean, you know, speaking of, I want you to tell me more about what that means, sort of that exchange that I just saw and what that looks like, whatever you're allowed to say, because I don't want to get in your family shit either. But your dad, you are the product of a Holocaust survivor, right? Your dad was born during the Holocaust and left in the 50s, right, to come to Canada.
Came in during the Hungarian Revolution.
Yeah, so in the 50s, came to the U.S.
Canada, actually.
Canada, sorry.
We grew up in
Vancouver. Yep. And all of that trauma probably sat with, you know, things that he didn't even know were sitting with him, right?
Sure.
We're sitting with him for years and decades. And yeah, I presumed that you did not get the Gabor that we got, right? And so what was it like, as much as you can tell, as much as you can share, or as much as you want to, just like I think it's super helpful for us to know like the who, what, when, where, and why of you growing up and kind of the influences on your lives and who shaped you in addition to your dad. Like what created, and I saw that I also did some digging and saw that your sister is a PhD student, clinical psychology, right? Like you all have gone on to do some pretty remarkable things. Not that everyday people not doing these things aren't remarkable, but you know what I mean? Like the ambitious people that are taking on ambitious tasks and careers in life. How did that all happen? I'll start with you, Aaron, and so that later he can tell me what you were lying on. No, I'm just kidding. But like,
I'm glad you're starting with him because I'm always talking about this stuff because I work with my dad. People are asking me about what was your childhood like. I've never heard Aaron pop off about this in public. It's your turn, brother.
It's your turn. Go for
Mike's
it. Pop
on.
off.
Go.
Well, you know, our dad has written a lot about his struggles and failings as a father and husband. And certainly there's a lot of difficulty in our household when we were growing up. You know, a strained marriage. Our dad was very narcissistic, workaholic, and had a lot of rage that he hadn't resolved. And certainly that impacted, you know, speaking for myself, it definitely impacted me. When I was a kid, I developed a stuttering problem after our mom went through a really tough, as our mom went through a very tough depression. So that was kind of the emotional context. But of course, there was also a lot of love, and in terms of values, you know, our dad was a student activist, a student radical against the Vietnam War, a very early anti-Zionist. Our uncle Janos, his brother, is a lifelong environmentalist, worked for Greenpeace and very active. Was put himself on the line. Like I remember one time when we were kids, he was out in a little boat protesting French nuclear tests. And it was very, very dangerous for him.
The Rainbow Warrior. But he would also go out on a little boat into the Vancouver Harbor when U.S.
That's right.
armed warships would be there. And he'd a little megaphone being like, "You're not welcome here." And they would spray him with high-pressure hoses and shit.
Yeah.
Jeez, badass.
And so, you know, our family surviving the Nazi Holocaust, that really helped instill this value of just wanting to stand up to oppression and to help people suffering everywhere. That's just always been a strong value with us. And when I was about 10 or 11, Dad, Gabor, went to the occupied territories, and he spoke on the radio, on the national radio in Canada from the West Bank, and talked about witnessing the Israeli crackdown on Palestinian protesters. And he wept. He started crying. And so, you know, that was a very impactful moment for me. And that, you know, it's moments like that I think really help shape who I am.
Had you ever heard him cry before that?
No.
I don't think I had.
Yeah,
and
how
I'm
old
not,
were you
and
then?
I'm not sure that I have since.
I have.
Have you?
I was 10 or 11 when that happened.
Yeah.
And But and then also I saw all the flack he took for the positions.
Yeah.
He would also, he was just very interested in the world. There's another trip he made when we were kids. He during the dirty wars of the 1980s, when the Reagan administration was funding all these death squads in Central America, he went to Nicaragua and wrote about it in Canadian newspapers. And so there was always that interest in the world and that desire to stand up to oppression and to speak up for people without a voice, and a willingness to take the hits, like all the flack and all the names he got called. And I think that had a very big influence on me, and it's something that I've tried to emulate for sure.
Amazing. Fill in the gaps there. What can you add to that, or what's your perspective on?
Well, one of the things Aaron omitted is he had a dictatorial older brother who I think contributed to the stutter. But you get to say where that came from.
We can debate that.
Yeah. No, I was jealous. He was cute and small, and I had the typical eldest brother syndrome. Yeah, I mean, I got to be with my parents first, which had its advantages and its drawbacks. It was a very intense home, very unstable, I would say. That was the biggest impact on me, just in terms of emotional stability, knowing what the mood would be from one moment to the next. Not unstable like, oh, dad's on an alcoholic bender or mom's leaving with the pool cleaner or whatever, but not that we had a pool. But unstable in the sense of like, how's this meal going to go?
Yeah.
How's this holiday going to go?
Yep.
So that was a feature, I think, of my childhood. A lot of intensity. Two parents who were both very intense people themselves. My mom was not born in war or genocide, but she had her share of childhood wounding. So there was anxiety in the home, there was tension, and I was a sensitive kid, and my personality, I like to say that my personality sort of developed, my wit sharpened itself against the whetstone of my parents' relationship, and became my sword and my shield. And I think humor was a part of our upbringing, which is very positive. Dark humor was a big factor in the Maté family.
Absolutely.
Just gallows humor, but not even gallows humor, like bestiality farmer humor as well. Like that Eastern European sick humor between my dad and his brothers. You might not remember it.
Well, I mean, like one example is when my dad took our mom Ray to meet his parents for the very first time.
Yeah, back in 1968 or whatever.
Yeah, for the very first time. She asked him for something that she could say to them in Hungarian to thank them for the meal. Oh God. And so he gave her a line, and she said it. And she thought she was saying, "Thank you so much for the wonderful meal."
She stood up and said, "And/or Judy?"
Yeah, but it turned out she was saying, "Go hang yourself."
Oh my God.
And our grandmother laughed her head off and said, "Same to you, dear."
Same to you.
So that was the vibe,
Yeah, some dark shit.
And so it's not a surprise that we both ended up sometimes, satirizing, making the lighter side of some very, very dark things. Yeah, and then I think that the continuation of that would be that as we grew into our adulthood, Dad started getting famous outside of Vancouver as a healer and therapist, which he wasn't. He was just a GP. He was a doctor. He delivered babies, but now he's getting into the psychology world, and of course, his beat, his whole thing is how childhood trauma. First of all, the multiple ways that can look, which is to say it's not just the big T traumas of sexual abuse and things like that, but the wounds that many of us carry are more subtle, and their profound impact across the lifespan. And he would use his own infancy as one example, and his own parenting as another example. So now all of a sudden, I'm a part of teaching moment anecdotes that are going out there into the world, and then the internet comes along, and now I've got my Instagram feed, the algorithm feeding me, oh, there's Gabor Maté talking about the time he hit his oldest son across the face in front of the family because he wouldn't sing happy birthday to him at age 3. So that's a complicated thing. And then the complicated thing of what you said about the world feeling like he's your dad. I've had to deal with my mixed feelings about that. And of course, what's funny is that out of all of us, I'm the one who chose to actually work with the guy and join forces with him and write this book and lead workshops and stuff. So, it was a very complicated childhood, but as Aaron said, full of good things, a lot of play, a lot of what can I say, dissident fortitude, like learning how to stand against the prevailing crowd. I mean, it was inconvenient because I couldn't enjoy G.I. Joe the way my friends did because I knew what a GI was and which army they fought for and what they did, you know. But, you know, it was, that stuff was actually really good.
Yeah.
He's also really instilled, and our mom too, actually. Both of them have really instilled not just, you know, political, being a political dissident, but also being really interested in looking at oneself, you know, and he's really, really imparted that as
especially
a
one's navel. I'm kidding.
Navel gazing, yeah. No, but he has. He's been very influential that way, you know, and all the things he's gotten into, like ayahuasca, you know, he's, you know, that has also impacted all of us.
And he's been very dedicated to, he's been very, not all parents are encouraging their kids to go heal their wounds. A lot of parents don't want to deal with that, but there's a real, sometimes a little too fervent, but certainly, I mean, historically a little too fervent, but overall just a deep commitment to his kids. I mean, he once said, and I think he regrets saying this quite this way, but he's like, I'm not afraid that my kids will be angry at me. I'm afraid they won't be angry enough at me. Which I still think is kind of self-absorbed. But I understand the spirit of it, which is that you want your kids to have access to their healthy self-assertion, right? And you don't want them to have their anger suppressed. And he's also, and I think another thing we got from him that can be, that I can lose in the mix sometimes, one of the things we didn't get from him was pressure to conform in society. There was no, are you going to be a doctor or are you going to be a lawyer? It was hands off, which, you know, sometimes maybe could have used more guidance. I don't know. But what there was,
the jury's still out. I think there should have been a little bit more. Anyway,
yeah, maybe there could have been. But what it's resulted in is each of us finding our own path and our own time, and making a go of it. You know, and a certain comfort in not hewing to already beaten paths, because he didn't become a world-renowned trauma therapist by planning to do that or become an author. He became an author at age 50.
Yeah.
So I think he's also an example for us of people can change at any age, people can grow, people can come into themselves. I think that's something he exemplifies.
He's deeply committed to everybody else's healing, everybody else. As for his own, it's a bit more of a challenge for him, right? But I've never met someone so committed to everybody else's healing, whether it's his own family or just anyone he comes across.
Yeah,
and he's great at it.
And then there was our mother, who has been a source of incredible, and it's such a terrible cliche in this society to say the woman is the quiet strength of the family, you know, more like the long-suffering strength, but still a tremendous amount of belief in her kids, a tremendous amount of kind of insisting that my dad do better when he slips, you know, and a kind of and certainly she instilled in us a love of the arts, a love of creativity. She's a painter, an artist. I've felt very much like me becoming a musical theater writer has been me in some ways choosing my matrilineal side over being, but I also do this mental chiropractic thing, which so I kind of, I've in some ways tried to synthesize, because I have both of those sides to me, you know. So they're one of a kind, and our family is too, I guess. But in other ways, we're way more like other families than people might think from the outside. And, you know, anytime the entire family gets together, we are reminded of just how human our family is.
One of the things I love about our parents is that if you compare them side by side, I mean, Dad can be very, very dark, brooding, you know. But if you look at our mom, Ray, her paintings are very whimsical,
bright,
bright, you know, smiling, dancing crocodiles and cats and dolls, and she's very, she's kind of floating on air a little bit. She's very, very loving, very sweet, very funny, and they're a good and they work very well together.
Well, and conversely, she can, in the flip side of it, she can be very anxious. She can, you know, and he can be very, he can have a lot of perspective and zoom out and be very calming, you know. So I think at their best, they each complement the other one's
Sounds like
difficulties
it.
and help stabilize each other.
Yeah.
You know, at their not best, that'll be part of my, you know, my Broadway musical someday, or it'll all come out in the memoirs.
Your memoir, yeah,
or theirs.
Yeah, I've been beginning to outline a memoir of my crazy family. You know, son of a war refugee, growing up in Guatemala. 12 kids, all the shit. But I can't. I don't know if you feel this way. Like I guess you're talking pretty openly about, and I do talk openly about the things I went through too, because it's my story, and I don't care if my dad doesn't like it. I try to honor him, and also like, this is what happened to me. But there's so many things about the story that it's like I have to wait till he's dead to put this book out. Like because I don't think he could. Our parents are two different kinds of people for sure, based on what I'm hearing. But I don't think he could handle it. Mm-hmm. I think it would for me to do the tell-all, which I've always been a tell-all kind of person. Like, if you ask, and I'm gonna give you the answer. I'm gonna shoot straight, but I don't think that he can, because there was so much darkness growing up. Mm-hmm. Again, it's totally different now. You know, you talked about how, you know, I mentioned your dad's a dad for so many, and then that started this whole thing. I feel the same way about, like, every once in a while I'll catch myself getting very angry that my kids have a grandfather who's super gentle and super kind and takes them to water parks and treats them well and never lays a finger on them that isn't loving and caring. Because I fucking didn't, you know, like, never. And that's like, it lasts for this long, and then I move on, right?
Yeah.
But
you'd be grateful that he's like that now.
100%. Like,
and happy for him that he gets
98% of me, 99% of me is like, oh my God, like, my kids don't have any abusive men in their lives, abusive people. Like, we don't hit our kids, we talk to them. Imagine that, right? Yeah. And, you know, they don't have abusive people around them, including my father, who for decades fought his fucking demons.
What era of conflict was he in Guatemala for?
So he was born in 5 years into the 1960 to 1996 war, the Civil War there. So he was born in the first part of it. They left because of that. Yeah. And then we moved back. So I moved back in the early 90s.
To Guatemala.
So I was there for the last
Which
few
also was
years.
a terrible time.
It was worse.
Yeah.
It was worse because I didn't know this, because I was young. But, like, you know, this war ended. They signed the papers. It's over. But now you had hundreds of thousands of militants that all they've ever known was, you know, killing and stealing and horrible things. Right? That's all they've ever done, and that's all they've ever received. Yeah. So the sort of the word was, okay, move into our cities, move into our towns, get work. Like, it's over. Like, no more fighting. But it's a underdeveloped country in every way, thanks to this country and many others. And so it got worse I've seen people get murdered. I've seen people get set on fire. I've seen people get kidnapped. They tried to kidnap me once. Like, it was way worse for 2-3 years after the war was over, because it was total mayhem. Like, you had hundreds of thousands of people that didn't know what to do. Not dissimilar to what's happening right now, is like, you've got all these young people that they were birthed in just complete and utter occupation and bullshit, right? Yeah. What do you think they're gonna do when they grow up? It's gonna blow at some point, you know?
Nick, does it cheer you up at all to know that those were just the birth pangs of a new world order?
Yes.
A rules-based international order?
Yes. So much so. Yeah. So much so.
Had to happen.
But I'm glad you guys went there with the family thing, because that's kind of, I didn't want, like, dirt. I'm not looking, this is not a daytime show, you know, where we're trying to, like, it's not a soap opera. But I did want to humanize the whole thing, because I know that at this point I've interviewed dozens and dozens of the world's most famous artists, the Matthew McConaughey's of the world. And, like, I always try to bring a human element to it, because it's like, everybody, your dad, Matthew McConaughey, Priyanka Chopra Jonas, they all shit the same way every single day. They all get hungry, they all get tired, they all get cranky, and they all have trauma, right? And so I always try to, like, bring the human element to it, and you brought it.
You know, for a while when The Myth of Normal came out, I narrated the audiobook.
I didn't know that.
And on the audiobook charts, me and Matthew McConaughey were, like, neck and neck for, like, several months.
For Green Lights?
Yeah.
I didn't know
And I
that.
was ahead of him a few times. That felt pretty good.
That's a good talking point. Keep that one. That's good.
Because
I
he's
like
got
that.
a good voice.
He does have a good voice.
Yeah, I
You
could
have a good
listen to
voice
that
too.
guy. Well, thanks.
Both of you do. Sorry, I went down the wrong pipe. One more question about both of your work that I would like to know, and then we'll get into the heavier shit.
Yeah.
Mental chiropractor.
Mm-hmm.
You've already told us what that is, but like, how did you come up with that? Like, I'm a walkaholic.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm not riding my bike around the city, I walk everywhere. My partner's always like, hey, we're going somewhere for the day. And like, if I can walk there, if it's within 4 miles, I'm walking there.
Yeah.
Like, I'll meet you there. Why am I going to get on a fucking train? Like, I don't want to get on a train. It's a beautiful day. I'm going to walk there, or I ride the bike. And so walking, I believe, is like, we could fix half our world's problems if we just walked more and like intentionally walked more. And so I love the idea. When I saw that, I was like, that's amazing. So how did you get into that? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, so the mental chiropractic piece came before the walking piece. The walking just ended up being a delivery system for that modality, which I was starting to develop. And it happened because a friend of mine, I was taking a walk with him once and giving him a mental chiropractic adjustment, which I'd started calling it after someone, I'll tell you that story in a second. But he said, hey, you're really good at walking with people. And I said, damn, not only am I good at walking with people, but that's when I do my best thinking. That's when I'm the clearest. I don't want to rent a office and sit.
Yeah.
I want to always be in motion. And also, what are we doing? We're getting unstuck. We're shaking up our point of view. Well, what are you doing when you're walking? Literally, with every step, you're changing your point of view. As far as the mental chiropractic,
There's a great song about that.
What's that?
There's a great song about that by Bobby Brown.
Sing it for us.
It's called Every Little Step.
That's right.
Yeah.
Aaron, it's so nice to see you being the one bringing random pop music
Sorry,
references
I'm
in this
saying,
time.
yeah.
Do you play that song while you're walking, just kind of like on in your phone? Just like
Maybe if I do a
background?
TV spot for this.
There you go.
Every little step you
Every
take,
little
I will
step.
be there. Good New Jack Swing tune. That was my favorite song off that album, actually. I would say more than "Don't Be Cruel" or "My Prerogative." What was I going to say? Yeah, so mental chiropractic. In some ways, it was a response to my father's work. Not really an FU, but a kind of like, okay, let's take this somewhere else, because
sure.
there was a time when I kind of, I'd say, lost my way about 10 years ago, and had a whole marriage misadventure that's just too much to get into. That'll be in my memoirs. But around that time, I fancied maybe that I'll apprentice with my dad in the ayahuasca space and learn how to do these group therapy circles and whatever. I was doing that with the person I was married to. And I just never could do it the way he did it. A, because I'm not him. B, because I'm me. And someone I was working with, I was actually in Peru leading something, and someone turned to me and said, you're not like your dad. You don't work with people like your dad. I said, I should hope not. Thank you. And he said, not that there's anything wrong with my dad. My dad's miraculous at this stuff. He's incredible.
Yeah.
But he said, you're not bringing people back to their childhood so much. You don't even seem to exude all that much like deep compassion. Like, you're compassionate, but you're also impatient. And you're like, what now? What next? Yeah. And you light up when you're helping people adjust you're like a mental chiropractor. I said, you're goddamn right I am.
Yeah.
I love that term. It just described exactly.
So great.
Because I want to be there for the moment where something crystallizes. Okay, great. You know where your trauma comes from. Great. You have compassion for yourself. Great. You can see the ways that your trauma has played out in your life. Cool. Very important step. Now what? And I get excited, and I get at my best when I'm having a conversation that's intentional, where we're saying we're getting unstuck today, baby. It's an event. It's not a process. I don't like hearing about people's process. I want to have the conversation that makes a difference. Maybe not the difference. You're not going to heal all your trauma in one conversation.
Right.
But I'll tell you what I find over and over again with clients, and I've walked with maybe 800 people now.
Wow.
I should verify that, but it's somewhere up there. That when you have a small victory, to quote a Faith No More song, in one area of your life, you get unstuck on one thing, one actual situation, not some big issue. Like if someone comes to me with daddy issues, I'll say, well, go see a therapist. If someone says, I'm seeing my dad next week, and every time I see him, I can't speak. Great, let's get unstuck on that. The minute you have an actual, like, present moment breakthrough with something, I think it sends a signal to the deeper wound that says, hey, you know what? You're not set in stone. We can actually not be beholden to these patterns and these issues forever. So because that's what turns me on, because I'm at my best when I'm walking with people, I created this thing called Take a Walk with Daniel. And that's what I do. And they walk where they are. I'm in Brooklyn, or I'm wherever I am. We're on the phone, or if we happen to be in the same place, we walk in person.
I love it. I love everything you just said. We'll have to go on a walk sometime.
Love that. Just get good and stuck first.
Yes. I'm there. I'm there. We could probably go after some shit right now. I'm actually working on, because I love walking so much and I think it's so important, I'm working on a podcast where it all takes place walking.
Oh, brilliant.
We'll have to do one at some point. It's a New York, it'll be a New York based thing, highlighting all kinds of different leaders in different areas. But I love that. And you can hire Daniel to do that. The link is in the bio. Link is somewhere. The link will be just
walkwithdaniel.com.
Yeah, walkwithdaniel.com. There you go. You can hire him.
But go to danielmaté.com too. Listen to my music.
It's all great. It's all great. Journalism. We're getting to the good stuff, but I really wanted to ask about, I've watched you pop up. Again, I didn't know about you 10 months ago. Sorry about that, but I know about you now. You've done a ton of interviews, and you've really, I don't just say this to blow smoke up your ass right now because we're sitting here, but like, you have held your own against some pretty obnoxious, evil, and unfortunately in some of their cases articulate, not saying the right stuff, but they're very hardcore. Like, they go at it and they don't leave you alone. On shows like Piers Morgan Uncensored and others.
Piers Morgan Unmoderated.
Seriously, jump the fuck in, dude. It's your show and you're letting these people say the most horrible things, not stay in their lane, and you just let them run in it. And he always says, I'm trying to be fair. He always lets, especially the last 9 months, I know he didn't used to do all about Palestine and Israel, but he always lets the Zionists go too long. And he always cuts off the anti-Zionists. And always apologize, or whatever, but he lets them, I have noticed that because I've watched almost every interview he's done, that he just lets him go. He lets him go. Do you enjoy that? Because that's not all journalism is, but you've had to show up in that way, I think, more the last 10 months. Do you enjoy that? And how have the last 9-10 months being in conversation primarily about this horrific genocide, how is that shaped and stretched you? Do you feel like you're getting better at debating these horrible people in many cases? Yeah. How has that last 9 or 10 months continue to shape you as a journalist?
Well, I do enjoy debating. I always have.
I can confirm.
I find it's a good challenge, and it's satisfying to me to take on what I think is propaganda and to do my best to debunk it. I'm sort of really interested in how narratives are built to manufacture consent for really awful things. And I've always been interested in that. I've always been really outraged when falsehoods pervade, especially for bad ends. And I like taking them on. And I appreciate every opportunity that I have to do it. So, people were very critical of Piers Morgan for the way he moderated the debate I was on. But I honestly, I've been marginalized so much for having the views I have that I'm grateful to be platformed anywhere. And I can handle it myself. And I enjoy doing it. I enjoy taking people on directly because, if you watch corporate media, you're allowed to lie. If you're serving whatever the establishment narrative is, whether it's on Gaza or something else, you're allowed to just lie and spread falsehoods. And I love any opportunity I can to puncture that just in the small way that I can.
Yeah. Well, you do a great job. Both of you have just really, I've already said that a couple times, but it's really true. When I mentioned to a couple people that I was going to have you both on, they're just please tell them both how much it's meant to have them in our corner, speaking up and speaking out the last 9-10 months.
Well, it should be said also that I can't do what Aaron does. The calm that Aaron is able to maintain in those conversations. He got heated on the Piers Morgan show. I could see that it was getting to you, but you still kept your wits about you.
Would you fucking lose it?
I would lose it. I would get very snide. I just wouldn't have the poise. Aaron was called the buzzsaw a few years ago by some YouTuber, and I thought that was a really good term for him because he really cuts through things with a kind of precision, and my approach is I guess I can do that too, but maybe not in the heat of the moment. I don't know that I trust myself in a debate. I don't know how you do it.
One of my favorite moments of that interview, to just go off of what you just said, was when what was his name?
Jonathan Conricus?
No, the other one, the Rabbi Yishai Fleischer, the settler, the guy that wants to see more destruction and thinks that they own everything, was when he was telling you to go check the Wikipedia because he said we're from Russia. And I thought it was very clever because like he wouldn't stop talking. And you didn't get more upset, but you kept repeating, oh, forgive me, you're a Russian settler. And you kept repeating that over and over again, not giving him the chance to it was exactly what was needed in that moment because Piers wasn't stepping in. And then when he did, he was telling you to shut up. And it was a great moment of like, I would have lost it. And
what I love about that guy is, the entitlement, like he feels the right that he asserts the divine right to steal Palestinian land because of what he thinks his Bible tells him. But then he says to me that I can't opine because I'm in Brooklyn or I'm
with
from
your
Canada.
Little books.
With my little books.
That was my favorite part. You're like, yes, I have books.
Yeah, I have books behind me. Yep.
Yeah. But so which is it? Like, if you have the right to go over and steal someone's land and take their water and everything, don't I have the right as another Jew to at least opine from very far away?
Well, that's always been the Zionist flex. If you think back to summer camp when we had Israeli counselors and in a very strange twist of fate, our anti-Zionist dad, although I'm not sure if he uses the term anti-Zionist, but functionally that's what he is, Zionist critical. Dad sent us to a left-wing Zionist summer camp, which was as progressive as you could get within still being attached emotionally to the idea of a Jewish state. And the Israeli counselors we had, and very much their role, their conscious role was to indoctrinate us, in part, be representatives of that country, really did give off that vibe of like, worship us, be like us, lust after our way of life, love the uniform, love the bravery, love the masculinity, the femininity, love the Middle Easternness, basically salivate after this country and emotionally deeply invest in it, little Jew. It's so much better than what you have in North America, but don't you have an opinion about it because you don't live there. So it's like, love it from over here, send it money and hearts and all of that stuff from over here, but don't from over here think, and if you want to criticize it, well then guess what? You have to move there. And we criticize it all the time.
And serve in the army.
Yeah, and then you'll earn the right to criticize this. Until
beat up some Palestinian kids for waving their flag, and then you can criticize us. Yeah.
Until you walk a mile in our occupation boots, like you can't.
Yeah.
Until you serve at a checkpoint, you won't really know the real Palestinians. So it's that kind of deeply. You talk about grooming, like narcissistic mindfuck. Cult indoctrination, and I think the movie Israelism did a very good job of exposing to a lot of people the industry behind that.
Yeah, and it's why still so many people who are otherwise liberal or progressive, but who grew up in that environment in North America, still find themselves unable, even right now, in the midst of a mass murder campaign in Gaza, to break away from it, and are still triggered by people who criticize it.
Yeah,
it's quite the phenomenon.
It's a little easier for me to understand, not this one in particular, because this is just difficult to deal with. But I'm a little more, like I understand a little more because I grew up in a Christian cult where it is very culty. Zionism is a cult.
Zionism essentially is also a Christian cult.
Yes. Yes, it is. And I grew up in a Christian Zionist upbringing that like we had, alongside the American flag and the Bible flag, I don't know if you've ever seen the Christian Bible flag that was always on stage at these churches, and they also had an Israeli flag most of the time. Like in our church in Rochester, New York, that there's not a Jewish person in here. Not any practicing Jews, definitely, but like we raised money for Israel. We had these like big campaigns. Literally the flag was in and around us all the time. So I understand, like, and if you were to ever question it, if you were ever to question our fealty to Israel because of these Bible verses, it was shut down immediately, and you were if you kept going, you were cast out. Like we don't question that. That is who we are. That is what we do. God gave all this shit to Israel, and they get to do whatever they want. However they see fit, God's backing them, and so they can do whatever the hell they want. So I understand. I came out of it, thank God. I got out of this cult many, many years ago, but it was completely a cult. And so I understand just doing a whole bunch of things, saying a whole bunch of things, and saying shit like that. Like you can't judge it. Like you can. It's amazing, it's great, and it's the way it's supposed to be, but don't you dare judge it. That was so many things growing up where I gave one of 12 kids, I gave my dad most of his gray hairs because my most frequent question or thing that I said growing up was why? Like why? Why do we do this? And it frustrated him to no end, but I wasn't satisfied with just like, this is the way it is. I asked why about everything. So and
I will say just in defense of our Camp Miriam, where we both had a great time, we were allowed to dissent.
Absolutely.
And there was always a space for me to have because I've always had the same views, and there's always been space for that. So,
yeah.
I mean.
And there were some counselors who actually really brought a lot of things about the occupation to my attention. There were some very progressive counselors. There were some counselors who you could tell were questioning their own Zionism. Like it wasn't a hardcore thing where it's just that the Overton window was at any one point was set pretty firmly. So at one point during the first years of the first Intifada, I remember sort of the Overton window is as far as the Israeli response is too harsh and we need land for peace, but Palestinians are terrorists and we need to defend ourselves. A few years later, you got Oslo. And then with the Overton window, we're arguing, well, should Jerusalem be shared? Should be a shared city,
Yeah.
Only towards the end of my time there, around when I was a counselor in around 2000, starting to be talk of a one-state solution, but it was kind of unspeakable because that's kind of the hard limit of left-wing Zionism, because Zionism itself posits that the Jewish state is necessary. But at a time when the two-state solution on the ground was dead or dying, it just was moribund because of the facts on the ground that Israel had created. It was harder and harder to keep up an enthusiasm for two-state solution. So there was a sense of, well, where do we go from here? And where I went from there as I got out. So, but you're right, Aaron. It was a vibrant place. But then again, Friday nights, Israeli dancing. The whole time we were there, they've removed it now, from what I hear, because I have friends who send their kids there. But the final song, you remember what it was at the end of the Israeli dancing?
Yes, I do.
It was Shir HaPalmach, the song of the Palmach, which was a
terror
organization in 1947-48, major perpetrators of the Nakba. And we would march around the sports field singing about how we are the proud Palmach, and from Metula to the Negev, from the land, really from...
It's really sick.
From the sea to the desert. I mean, it was almost from the river to the sea. I'm talking about the lyrics now in Hebrew. And we would just sing the song over and over again, this very martial song. And
like you're literally celebrating rapists and murderers.
Yeah.
But of course, you're singing in Hebrew, so you don't know what the words mean. You don't know the historical context fully back then. But
which kind of makes it more fucked up that they made you sing it while most of you didn't know.
Yeah, sure.
They did teach us the literal meaning of it, because they would have, big poster board and T-shirt, and some Israeli would be like, Anu ha-palmach, we are the palmach. So we'd learn what the words meant, but we didn't learn, what we learned was they were war heroes.
Yeah.
We didn't learn, the word Nakba I only heard way towards the end of my participation there.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I remember, talking to our dad about it, I remember after he explained to me what the Palmach was, what the Haganah was. It was the Irgun, wasn't it? We're celebrating.
Well, the song was the song of the Palmach.
The Palm. Okay, yeah. Anyway, I remember I stopped singing it at a certain point, but yeah.
304 days ago, October 7, 300, like that to me, I just like did the quick math today before coming over here, and I was like, oh my God, like I can't believe, because it was first time we connected was back in January. I was doing a 110-mile walk around Manhattan to raise money for Palestine. Did it in the freezing cold, injured myself. It was a whole thing, but raised a significant amount of money and was able to donate to Doctors Without Borders and World Central Kitchen and a couple others. So, and that was January. That was 7 months ago. Like, and that was already several months into this genocide. So this has been going on for 1 minute is far too long. 10 months. Tomorrow will be 10 months. Today's the 6th. August 7th is tomorrow. Pretty fucking crazy. Aaron, I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute. Can you give, now we're all getting our feeds filled, our social media feeds filled with all kind, Al Jazeera and all the different updates from things that are going on. And I was checking in with my Lebanese friends over the past few days because of what's happening there. And I have there's an amazing organization there called Al Sama that I'm sort of courting to be on their board of directors, and they're right in Beirut. And it was a couple neighborhoods away that got bombed. And so I was checking with them. And anyway, we're all hearing all this information about what's going on. Could you give a succinct, or take however long, but like a State of the Union, like where are we right now? Before we get into some specifics, and I want to sort of move toward the election as we move through our conversation. What is going on? Where are we? Like, is there any reason for hope? It seems like, well, they just killed their negotiator, right, in Iran, and it seems like they're continuing to flaunt the mask is off. We know that they don't want to cease. Like we already knew that, but now, like every single day that happens, like we see that there's no way they want this to end. They want it to keep going. They want to, just listen to Ben Gvir, listen to Smochers, listen to them talk about it, and they do not want this thing to end. So where are we right now? What's sort of happening? Is there any reason to hope? Give us just a quick State of the Union, just since you're sort of living in this world every single day.
Well, I mean, we're moving so dangerously and quickly that I fear that by the time this comes out, that's what I'm saying.
In a week, it's going to be next Tuesday,
But the constant through line, no matter what the day is that because we're dealing with a Jewish supremacist regime that refuses to recognize the equality of the people whose land it stole to exist, the Palestinians, we're in a constant state of threat. And because the Biden administration has provided Israel with unfettered support, the only deviation from that was this one symbolic pause of one weapon shipment by Biden of these 2,000-pound bombs that they paused while still arming Israel to the teeth with all these other weapons of war that still burn people alive, as we just saw the other day in Gaza as we're recording this. We're in a constant state of dangerous escalation. So as we're speaking, the world is kind of waiting to see how Iran and its allies respond to Israel carrying out the assassination of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran and also a top Hezbollah leader in Beirut. And the last time Iran and its allies responded to an Israeli attack, that was in April.
Yep.
That was after Israel bombed an Iranian diplomatic building in Damascus, which is an act of war because it's considered, a diplomatic facility is considered the sovereign territory of the government that occupies it. So basically, Israel carried out an act of war on Iran. And because of Iranian restraint, things didn't escalate there. Iran very carefully telegraphed its response and gave Israel and the U.S. plenty of time to prepare. And Iran did that so it could show some sort of response, but very consciously not trying to escalate. And the question is now has Iran lost its patience with the regime in Israel, which shows no interest in stopping its mass murder campaign in Gaza and is willing to try to provoke Iran and Hezbollah? So I think this comes down to, if there's any hope from the point of view of not wanting to see a wider war, it's that Iran and its allies continue to practice restraint. But unfortunately, if you're Iran and Hezbollah and you look at this government that has rejected, and this is really important, Israel's had so many diplomatic opportunities to resolve all the issues there for a very long time. For decades now, all the Arab states have offered Israel full normalization if it simply accepted what is a wide international consensus of withdrawing to the 1967 borders and allowing a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, and also a just resolution of the refugee issue. Because when Israel was created in 1948, the Zionists expelled hundreds of thousands of people and stole their homes. And so the Arab states have said there has to be a resolution to that in accordance with international law. everybody supports that. Iran has even supported that consensus. They signed on to that, I think, in 2017. Hamas, at various points, has expressed a willingness to accept that. Never to recognize Israel, but to accept a Palestinian state.
And wasn't Hania one of the more moderate-leaning ones?
He was. He said that before October 7th and afterwards, too. In the weeks after October 7th, he said, we're willing to enter negotiations for a two-state solution. Israel, though, is just, it defines itself as having the right to all that land, even to parts of Lebanon, according to some Israelis, and therefore it won't accept any compromise. And it's filled with supremacy and hegemony, and that's kind of its raison d'etre. And so accordingly, it's rejected all possible compromises. When Palestinians have tried to be nonviolent, including Hamas, when they promoted the Great March of Return, which began in March 2018, which was tens of thousands of Palestinians marching peacefully, Israeli snipers gunned them all down.
Yeah.
And so Israel's foreclosed all meaningful diplomatic opportunities and refused to engage with anybody who seriously wants peace. And in the case of Ismail Haniyeh, a Hamas leader who was willing to entertain that outcome, rather than try to see what Hamas could agree to, they've now killed him. So the short-term hope is in Iran and its allies, I guess, continuing to practice restraint. But then the problem is, if they practice restraint, what happens to the people of Gaza? I mean, are Iran and Hezbollah going to let Israel just keep massacring people?
Yeah, this is what I want to, I'd love to ask you, because I've been struggling with myself.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to feel? How do I feel about this imminent, impending, possible retaliation attack? Now, on the one hand, I have people I dearly love, like very close to me, who are there right now within the 48 borders of Israel. They would be at grave risk if a major attack happened.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there's something in me that wants to see the bully put in its place.
Yeah.
And if you do practice restraint, Israel is always flaunting its deterrence capacity.
Yeah.
Well, I hate thinking in cold military terms, someone like Greg Stoker is a great example of someone who can really break things down along sort of realist military lines about balances of power and whatever. I recommend his show a lot. We had him on Bad Hasbara recently. But for me, it hurts to think in that way. And yet, at this point, I'm like, what are the consequences of not, responding? And I remember Norman Finkelstein saying 10, 15 years ago, Israel has become a Spartan state.
It's
a
pretty
lunatic
good impression.
state.
Yeah.
Now he calls it a satanic state.
And now it's a satanic state, which makes my innards writhe. I love Norm. But what he said was that a society like that, the only way they will cease and desist is a major catastrophic defeat of some kind. And that the defeat in Lebanon in 2006 was partway there. It was deeply humiliating, but it wasn't a killing blow to their bluster and bravado. So it's like, what to wish for?
Yeah. The only time they've ever given back land that they've stolen was when, after 1973, when Egypt and Syria launched a war to try to get their land back, because Israel stole it in 1967. Israel almost lost in that war. And that's when Israel got scared and realized that Egypt was a problem. And also, if they took out Egypt from the equation, that could accelerate their theft of Palestinian land, which is what they really cared about.
Which is what they did.
So that's why they made peace. That's what they made peace with Egypt. So, which is really the only time they've ever given land back. And then they withdrew from Lebanon in 2000 after Hezbollah defeated them, basically.
Wasn't that 2006?
When they withdrew from Lebanon.
Okay.
When they finally withdrew from Lebanon, I believe it's 2000. And then, of course, they launched a new war in 2006 after Hezbollah kidnaps or captures some Israeli soldiers, hoping that will lead to a hostage exchange, because, of course, Israel's kidnapped many more people from Hezbollah and Lebanon, and, of course, Palestinians. But instead of just doing a negotiation, Israel can't stand, because when you're an occupier, you cannot stand the idea of the subhumans humiliating you and actually trying to operate on an equal footing. So Israel tries to invade Lebanon, kills a lot of people, but also suffered military setbacks because Hezbollah can fight back, and Israel hates fighting people who can fight back.
I mean, Israel hates fighting people, period. It likes bombing civilian neighborhoods.
Exactly.
Israel, there are no combat zones
Yeah.
in Gaza. Israel likes dropping bombs from the sky.
Yeah.
It's actually, in the event of an all-out war, its soldiers would be, I think, from what I understand, really at a disadvantage because they haven't actually had to fight anybody.
Yeah, and unlike their opponents, they're not fighting for a cause that you can believe in. They're fighting
right.
for occupation and supremacy.
Yeah. They're fighting for very brittle ideas.
Yeah. But they do have nukes, and they do have the backing of the U.S. And I guess that's a way out of this. Is if finally the U.S. could change its position.
That's really the only way, right?
In terms of, rather than everyone being destroyed, yeah, I think that is the.
If we could, if the U.S. I'm talking about restraint. I think if the U.S. could just calm things down to 32 standing ovations for Benjamin Netanyahu, not 58. I feel like we could get it down to a manageable number of standing ovations. Then that would send a message. I'm kidding, of course, but I forget sometimes this isn't the Bad Hasbara podcast where my co-host is going to just riff with you. You got the joke.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? It's hard to imagine how far a U.S. government could go, but I guess we do have this election coming up that's worth asking questions about, I guess.
This is the change that's happened in me the last year. Up until the last year, I had been a pretty ardent pacifist, just naively thinking that literally I have never owned a weapon. Yeah. And I had a lot of friends that live all over the U.S. where you can own weapons. They're like, how do you have 2 daughters, you have a son, you have a wife. How do you not have a weapon in the house? And I'm like, honestly, I don't give a fuck. If they want to come and hurt, I just don't care, right? And it wasn't like that. I never would say those things, or even I didn't come to that conclusion naively. I understood the ramifications, the implications, but I was, I'm a very, very, very leftist Christian now, but as someone who grew up in Christianity and tried to leave it and couldn't, and am still here, it was sort of a naive, it was me naively trying to be like Jesus, who sacrificed himself, right?
Yeah.
But the last year, just being so inundated in all of what's happening, it radicalized me.
Well, he overturned the tables.
It did, because the reality is, if we're going to get, I see us, I think you two, you both are involved in this idea of we're world building. Kind of like my kid, whenever I let the rare time he gets to go on video games and he plays Minecraft and he builds a world, right? He's building something from nothing. That's what I think we're doing with these ideas that you're talking about. Your work, it's so important. We're casting a vision for a new world that we might not get to see. We probably won't get to see the entirety of our vision in our lifetime. But I see myself as a world builder, and to world build all these people that are in power, whether it's Israel, whether it's this fucking colonialist project that we live in, these people in power are never going to give up that power. They're never, it's too good. They jerk off to it every night. It's so good. They love the power. No amount of money, no offer will let them give it up because the power is so good. And we're backing Israel, and we're backing we've done all this stuff. There was a Guatemalan genocide during that 36-year war where they raped, I could be exaggerating here, but I think I saw they estimate close to 1 million Mayan women were raped during those years.
With U.S. support.
We paid for it. Yeah, right? So this idea of I obviously don't wish harm on anyone that's innocent. I don't want this shit to happen, but they're never going to stop. Yeah. In where we're sitting right now, the U.S., they're never going to stop unless it's taken from them. And that's the big looming question for Gaza, for those of us here that want to see collective liberation happen for as many people as possible. It's just so hard to conceive of getting that without taking it by force. And I don't know what that means.
I guess the only non-bloodbath scenario I imagine is the great global Chinese empire ascends very quickly and makes the American empire obsolete. And now we can't afford to, and then we just have to meekly submit to our Chinese overlords and live happily ever after.
I'll take it. I'll take it over this, where my tax dollars are going to burn babies alive and
Yeah. Also, I want to, in terms of hope, seeing all the young people protesting on college campuses, it reinforced for me, one day this generation of, boomers, all these people have been career Zionists like Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell. They're not going to be here anymore.
No.
They're all going to pass. And this younger generation, I do think it is an actual moral generation. It's like you meet these young people and they don't have any fear about criticizing Zionism like people in our age groups do. Like they're totally committed to justice, and they're willing to do something about it. And I do have a lot of hope in them. I really, really do.
And I think there's also hope to be found just in the Palestinian people themselves.
Oh my God!
I mean, they're obviously they are somewhat fractured, and Israel has done a marvelous job of dividing them into at least 6 different kind of interest groups. You have the Palestinians within 48 Israel, the West Bank, East Jerusalem have their own situation with their own identity cards, Gaza, the refugee camps surrounding in the region, and then the diaspora. All of them are going to have a different outlook, and they're still one people. And having met more of them in the past 7 months than I had, way more than I had in my entire life combined up to that point, and actually now calling many of them, dear friends, just understanding the indelible memory that people carries as their birthright, and they will never relinquish that. And as long as the memory of Palestine is alive, then Palestine is alive for them. And that's what Israel can never wipe out, desperately wants to. But, the Germans were better at extermination than Israel is. They didn't finish the job. And, as long as that connection to that land, the food, the weaving, the clothing, the culture, the music, the stories exists, then I think there's some kind of embodied hope.
And Israel has the potential to implode as well. I think, as was mentioned, look, as we're recording this, there's recently violent protests over Israel's right to rape and sexually assault Palestinian prisoners, where people literally assaulted a base where some soldiers were being held for sexually assaulting, raping Palestinian prisoners, and people,
including members of Knesset.
Members of the Knesset took part in that, and so it's such a sickened society that it also just might implode. I mean, there is a precedent for that. So, look,
let's go Israeli civil war.
Well, sure,
work it out yourselves.
Yeah, sure. Look, and even if there were no grounds for hope, right? Even if there are objectively no grounds for hope, it should not impact our actions whatsoever. So long as you have privilege, then you have responsibility, you have opportunity in the U.S. especially, but all states around the world, especially NATO states that are allied with Israel. Everyone has an opportunity to do something to stop what's being funded in their name, and to, if similar with South Africa, once South Africa lost the support of the U.S., especially, apartheid crumbled, and I like to believe that could happen again. And certainly we have the capacity to try to make that happen.
In my mental chiropractic work, I always prefer the word possibility to the word hope. Hope, even if it doesn't mean to, tethers itself to a hoped for outcome that's always going to be, by definition, kind of unlikely. And if you need to believe that outcome is going to happen sometime soon or whatever, in order to, then that's a heavy lift. But possibility springs eternal, actually. Like in this moment, what's possible?
Yeah.
Okay, there's no hope. What's possible?
Yeah.
That's what people in Auschwitz had to do.
Yep.
And Viktor Frankl and Primo Levi have written about that, right? So let's say there's no hope. Well, still, what now? And sometimes hope can be hopeless, And if we let go of needing to know how it's going to turn out, being attached to the outcome and just saying, how can we bring the best of humanity to bear right now? I think this has been a horrible, 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 horrible time since October 7th. But I think there's a lot of people also, including Palestinian friends I know, that would say that they've been changed for the better by it. And that's because the possibility that's inherent in human beings and collective struggle and community and solidarity and empathy and all that has come to bear. Palestinians have never had more of a voice on the global scene than they have now. Am I saying it's been worth it? Fuck no. And here we are, because people have been rising to a very, very sad occasion.
It's such a key observation, because I think we saw the same thing in 2020 with Black Lives Matter, right? Like, this one horrific situation happens, George Floyd, knee on his neck, several minutes, gets choked to death. And there were so many people that their lives have been radically changed by the movement that came after that. The marches and the standing up and the education that took place, the books that they read, the courses that they partook of that they would not have otherwise. There are, if there's a sliver of, again, I don't know if hope is the right word because of all the fucking terrible things that are happening to Palestinians right now that they can't control, but there's never been a greater amount of people on the planet that care about this issue, that have sacrificed friends and jobs and status, that have donated, that are standing up, that are speaking out, that have just said, fuck everything else. This is what matters. Like, collective liberation, free Congo, free Sudan, free Palestine, free Haiti. Like, we've got to get everybody free. They're now on the collective liberation train that prior to October 7, they're just chilling. They were just coasting. And not that we can't still chill and coast and have fun. We need to do that as well. But like, they're more awake than ever.
Yeah, let me say on this point, it really is to our collective shame that back in 2018, when people in Gaza were being gunned down by Israeli snipers
100%.
with American bullets, that there wasn't
this
back then. That's because that was the people of Gaza saying, we're putting ourselves on the line here. We're doing what everyone tells us to do, which is nonviolence. And they went out there, got massacred, and they were demonized in U.S. media. U.S. media coverage was so terrible. There's a wonderful film about this by some friends of mine called Gaza Fights for Freedom. Or it's by Abby Martin and Mike Preisner. I might have gotten the title wrong.
Oh my God, love
but
it.
But they have footage from the march, and also they talk about the corporate media response and the way the protest of Gaza was demonized. But there was not a global response.
You know what the sad reality of why?
What do you think?
Because there was no October 7th to precede it.
Right, because Noah's
October 7th got everyone looking
People
there.
initially cared so much that Israel was getting attacked.
That's right. And now it's Israel's righteous response and everyone having to justify it. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to the Great March of Return. Who needs to pay attention to that? It's just some Gazans walking.
Yeah.
And let's move into, I want to be respectful of your time. Let's move into the last few minutes of our conversation. Hopefully we can do a round 2 or something at some point. This has been so good, helpful for me. But on this point of there's been, like all conflicts that have religion involved in it, there are people on both sides, right? People that are of Jewish faith, deeply rooted, that are using the faith and the scriptures to support everything that's happening.
I mean, there's a bunch of godless heathen Jews as well, like atheist Jews, which is most of the state of Israel. I reject the idea at all that this is a religious conflict. First of all, Palestinians are Muslim and Christian, doesn't discriminate. Plus, there were Palestinian Jews before the state of Israel. But anyway, continue.
Well, I guess I completely agree with you. But there are a lot of times this comes down. I guess here's what I'm getting at is there are so many people that have become overly critical, not of all the fuckery that's happening, but of the faith, the faith behind it, right? Sure. And any faith, every faith, I belong to a faith that has committed the most horrific, atrocities throughout history. I
heard about some of those.
Yeah, a couple of them, right? Yeah. In the name of God, in the name of Jesus, in the name of this.
With God
I'm very
on our
fascinated
side,
by all these these shows that have been made lately, these Vikings and all these shows that show all the horrific things that were done. I mean, just the most horrific, torturous things that have happened in the name of my faith. And there was a period in 2000 when Trump was nominated and all of my evangelical friends supported him. I tried every which way, y'all, to leave the faith. I did not want to be associated with them. And then 2019, 20, I couldn't leave my faith. I tried to unbelieve it, disbelieve it all, and I couldn't. So here I am, still believing it, trying to navigate it. But I don't, you mentioned the other day in that Al Jazeera English interview, I think it was it Rachamin?
Yeah.
Compassion, mercy.
Mm-hmm.
And
which is very similar to Rahim, the Arabic word which appears in the daily prayers about like 8 times or something like that.
And so like when you look back, whether it's Islam, whether it's Judaism, whether it's Christianity, no matter, like at the heart of all of when you take the human equation out of it, and when you take all the influences that made people write the scriptures in the way that they did, right, to really accent the angry God and the war and all the genocides that happened, the Amalekites and all the stuff that we did. Compassion, mercy, justice, love is really at the root of it. So I don't even know how practicing you are of your faith, but what do you want?
Say we're both out of practice.
Out of practice, kind of rusty, a little rusty. But is there any part of you that wants to communicate to people, this is, because I don't think that everybody gets it. I have evangelical friends that believe this is a religious thing.
Yeah.
And they believe that Israel's completely 100% in the right for doing this because God gave them the land. What do you want people to know about, even if you're rusty, about the Jewish faith and how much this is not a religious thing?
Yeah. There's so many reasons I don't want to engage with that question,
Fair.
But I will. In expressing them, I think I'll give an answer.
It's tough, yeah.
Number one, to anyone who's look, if you have latent anti-Semitism in you, there's just going to be something about Jews that already bothers you.
Sure, yeah.
There's just something up with those Jews.
Yeah.
And you'll be looking for, well, what is it? And you see Candace Owens these days, who's done some, I think, worthwhile and praiseworthy reporting on, or at least, hosting Norman Finkelstein and advocacy for Palestinians and all that. But you see some of her stuff, and there's just this kind of like, what's up with these Jews kind of vibe, Well, if
she says some crazy stuff.
Yeah, she said
she believes, I think there was like a Christian Holocaust overseen by Soviet Jews.
Right. Wasn't it the Armenian one? No.
No. I mean, I apologize if I'm getting that wrong.
Yeah.
And the point is, I've heard her say some really.
Yeah, she says some nuts stuff, right? So her or her audience or whoever, if you're inclined already towards like the what's up with these Jews kind of thing, well, I don't have much to say to you except go get your mind like check that out. You're probably harboring some bigotry and some racism.
Yes.
And it's tempting, and there's a reason why Jews have been looked askance at over the years. Not a valid reason, but historical context. In a lot of places, Jews have been there, but they've been kind of separate from it, or it's an easy scapegoat or whatever. But you got to deal with that in yourself. And I'm not going to spend time trying to convince someone who's leaning towards anti-Semitism to step back from the edge. I'm just not. Like, you check in with yourself.
Yeah.
And if you feel like, I actually have this nasty like dislike and enmity towards this group, well,
work on that.
Go get right with yourself. Yeah. And there's lots of great Jews you can connect with, and great Jewish writers and artists and thinkers or whatever. And you can have your criticisms of Jews, and you can even have your criticisms of organized Judaism. We all dump on Christianity all the time. It's fine.
Yep.
Certainly the Western world loves to dump on Islam, you know? So I don't think Judaism is above reproach, and certainly Jews aren't either. But if it's Jews qua Jews that you're objecting to, that's one thing.
Yeah, there's a big difference there. Yeah. Criticism of a religion or how they do things, or some of versus Yeah, we all know. Right. I think people listening right now know if they've got some.
Right. So I would say that for other people who are not, entertaining anti-Semitic bigotry, there's lots of positive Jewish culture you can connect with that's not Zionist. You can look at some of the earliest critics of Zionism were Jews. Yeah. And they still are to this day. Some of the greatest critics of Israel are Jews. Some of them are Israelis. If you want to disabuse yourself of hating all Jews who were born there or all Jews who have lived there, look at Ilan Pappé, look at Avi Shleim, look at what's his name? Nev Gordon, any number of these, or not the scholars, Yonatan Pollock, Maoz Inon, including families of victims of October 7th. So there's just all kinds of ways. What I will say though about the faith thing, because you asked personally for us, I've always been very atheist. I've always identified as culturally Jewish. I am, in the past 8 months or so, someone's come into my life who has kind of exposed me to Jewish mysticism and gotten me thinking about what's been missing in my connection to Judaism and what might be available if I was, say, interested in what the Kabbalists said or what the Talmud says. Like, there is a rich body of knowledge and literature, whether you're talking about the European Jewish tradition that was wiped out by the Holocaust, or the Jews of the Middle East, which is where a lot of Jews come from, and we aren't taught about that because there's a strong bias towards the Ashkenazi Jewish version of things. But either way, there's such a deep well of knowledge that I have barely scraped the surface of that has a lot, I think. We all need spirituality in our life in some way. And most North American Jews who have left the Jewish faith find it in like some kind of watered down version of Buddhism. And I'm starting to think, well, okay, but why not dip back into the Song of Songs and why not dip back into the Talmud? So I'm getting more Jewish curious at this point is what I would say.
Fascinating.
And I think there's a lot of beautiful things in there. And there's certainly a lot to find to base one's anti-Zionism in, to base one's Palestine solidarity work in terms of freedom, truth, justice, love, compassion, all those things.
I love that.
Noam Chomsky likes to cite a passage from the Bible, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't remember the exact citation, but basically he says it's one of the prophets, maybe Elijah, goes to the king, and the king says to him, "You're a hater of Israel because you're criticizing me." And the prophet responds, "No, I'm not. I'm actually a patriot. And criticizing you, criticizing the king is not a hatred of religion or country." That's basically the message of the passage.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know that one. I do
do.
remember Dad writing an op-ed back in the Globe and Mail, and it started or ended with a biblical passage that I thought was very effective and moving. Something like, "Trust not in a quantity of riders and men and horses." Basically, we're not supposed to worship false idols. Well, what is Israel but a fucking golden calf?
Yeah.
A blue and white calf that gives people a fake sense of allegiance to something strong and enduring. Yeah. It's a temporary entity, and it is not the word of God. And we're supposed to be, emet, Torah emet, the truth of the Torah. That's supposed to be our rock, our foundation, our rock of ages. So I remember that quote in Dad's thing, and when it comes from these scriptures, it does have a certain gravitas to it that like end colonialism doesn't. I'm not saying we shouldn't try to end colonialism, but there is something in our tradition, I think, that's probably available to us that if some of us could, get over our allergy to religion.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, not being religious myself at all, it would be. I can't make a case on those grounds. It wouldn't be authentic. But for me, I just point to history. How can anybody who knows about the Nazi Holocaust ever want to emulate that behavior and cause any suffering to anybody else? And when you think about the suffering that's being inflicted on Palestinians now, it's beyond comprehension. So I just point to history and appeal to universal values of morality. I also would, what would Jesus say? Based on his teachings, how can you find any justification in his teachings for what Israel is? But yeah, listen, when someone has that belief that this is divinely endowed, it's very hard to dissuade them. And
brainwashed.
And so some cases I don't try to make, and I hope people can wake up.
And maybe the best way to get through to someone like that would just be to say, "Are you sure you haven't turned Israel into your God? Are you sure you're actually do you think there's a danger of us worshiping a nationalistic state in place of the universal values that we're supposed to?" And I don't know how someone would respond to that, but it seems to me that the Neturei Karta, the Orthodox Jews who are opposed to Israel. I mean, I heard two of them interviewed on Glenn's podcast on System Update, on Rumble. Beautiful interview with these two Orthodox Jews, and they made the most eloquent case against Zionism that I've ever heard. They just cut it off at the root. They say there's nothing Jewish about this at all. It's an anti-Jewish movement.
Wow.
It's an anti-Semitic movement.
Yeah.
It kills Judaism the minute you accept that we have the right to decide when we return to the Holy Land. That's not what our scripture says. Our scripture says God will ordain when the time is, and then all peoples will live in peace there, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah.
You're breaking one of the first commandments. You're taking God's name in vain when you carry on like Israel's carrying.
Let's wrap up with this. Well, I hope this will be quick. It will be quick. Well, it'll depend on you if it's quick. But I would be remiss if
we accept the mission.
Okay, great. I would be remiss if I didn't mention sort of a big thing that happened today, which is that Walz instead of Shapiro was chosen as Kamala's running mate. Shapiro, raging Zionist, former IDF soldier. It is clear how he would have wanted things to go if he became her running mate. And Walz, you know, has a lot of allegiance to Israel in the past, but seems to have progressed and sort of encouraged the protesters up at Columbia when that all was going on, and has advocated for a ceasefire.
Well, it helps that he's Minnesotan, right? Because that's a place where there's a
Minnesota,
lot of
nice.
Uncommitted.
Well, yes, and
Minnesota uncommitted.
Yes, Minnesota uncommitted. Yes, that to me, as I was sort of gauging what was happening, I have a lot of friends that are in the we will never vote for another fucking Democrat ever again, and we're going to vote for Jill Stein, Cornel West, whatever. And they want to see this big sort of revolution happen. They don't care if it comes with Trump getting in and Project 2025 getting, you know, underway. And then you have a lot of people that also want a ceasefire, also want they want all that shit to happen, to not happen as well in Gaza, but they also don't want Trump. They don't want Project 2025. They don't want us to regress 50 years, right? Yeah. And that's both positions. I sort of straddle the fence between them. I get both. The revolutionary in me wants to say, fuck everything, like burn it all down, even if it's through Trump, and we'll restart again, right? But that's it feels a little bit like 15-year-old me, where it's like, well, I totally get it, Nick. But also like your trans friends and your black and brown friends. And I'm the son of an immigrant/refugee. Like my whole story doesn't happen if Trump gets in again. And there's just a lot going on. So what's the gut reaction right now? Does that feel hopeful, or what do you sort of see happening in the next 3 months? Like, do you think that was, I think that we, the uncommitted, I don't know about you, but like,
well, we're not citizens.
So okay. So, but like, I don't know where you would be anyway.
Yeah.
But like, I was part of the uncommitted, still am. I'm giving myself till the evening of November 4 to decide. Yeah. What do you think sort of does that feel like a hopeful Walz coming on, or?
Yeah.
Because we're paying for it. Like, and it's a big deal. It's
a
big deal how this thing plays out.
One thing that is hopeful, or grounds for hope, is that Joe Biden's off the ticket.
100%.
Anything is better than Joe Biden. He is just an unhinged warmonger, has been his whole career.
Yep.
I admit to being naive. I didn't think he'd be this bad, but he, shortly after October 7th, he bragged about his ability to fuel two wars in Israel, Palestine, and also in Ukraine. And he was indignant at the suggestion that he couldn't. This was an interview with 60 Minutes. He said, we're the United States, for God's sakes. We're the essential nation. Of course we can do this. So he was proud of his ability to, and whatever you want to say about Trump, I don't think he's that ideologically committed to warmongering like Joe Biden is. Not that Trump is a good, peace-loving person, but Biden just has this deep, deep commitment to war and hegemony that sort of defines his identity in ways I think other politicians don't. So I'm thrilled he's off the ticket. Let's look at Barack Obama. Like, you think Obama is a committed Zionist? When he wakes up in the morning, he cares about serving Israel and helping it kill children and steal Palestinian land? No, but he came to Washington and he quickly realized that if there's no political benefit to him at all for standing up to Israel, and a lot of cost. And so he basically stood by and let Israel expand its settlements.
In fact, he knew better. He had been exposed to Rashid Khalidi.
He met Rashid Khalidi, and he met Edward Said. He sat next to Edward Said at a dinner, and he would, tell Ali Abu Nima of the Electronic Intifada, I'd like to say more about Palestine, but I can't right now. So he knows what's up. But he just, in the political reality, for someone who wants to be successful in power is that you just don't stand up to Israel, and Obama didn't. At the very end of his tenure, he let one resolution pass at the UN that was like mildly critical of Israeli settlements, but that was it.
Netanyahu never forgave him.
And Netanyahu still never forgave him because Netanyahu was so entitled and chauvinist and racist, frankly. Yeah. So whether it's Walz or it's Shapiro as vice president, I don't think tangibly it makes a difference. But to the extent that sometimes personalities can matter on certain decisions. So I'd rather have Walz in there than Shapiro, who is like an open bigot, if you go back to what he said for a long time and tried to serve in the IDF. So I'm glad that it's Walz over Shapiro. And if Kamala Harris and Walz win, how they govern, to the extent they'll do anything positive, if they will, it will have to come from massive grassroots pressure where there's some political cost to them continuing with the status quo. And so that's up to us. I expect nothing from them whatsoever. Yeah. Left to their own devices, they'll continue the policy as is. But I do think that the uncommitted movement can take some credit. I don't know if that's the reason why they picked Walz. I mean, Shapiro had issues with covering up crimes, and he also was said to be too politically ambitious. And Kamala Harris was uncomfortable with that.
And they may have wanted a populist-sounding guy to put J.D. Vance in his place.
Yeah.
Who's such a phony. You know?
Yeah.
And Walz has a real everyday guy, Midwestern, but actual friendly.
Yeah. And he's done good things as governor. He had free school meals.
Yeah.
And he actually has a populist record as opposed to Biden and Trump and Vance, who pretend to be populist but don't really have anything to show.
But it does at least indicate that they take seriously the progressive wing of their party, at least the progressive on Palestine wing of their party, which they never had before. I mean, it might not mean that.
It could mean that.
It could mean that.
Which, certainly, uncommitted certainly can take a lot of credit for letting Joe Biden know that there was a political cost to his support for mass murder. And I do think that was a factor in the forces that pushed Joe Biden out, because they realized that they were not going to win these states so long as he was on the ticket. And when you look at the map and all those voters in Michigan who were just revolting against his Israel policy, his Israel servility, that had to be, I think, at least part of the thinking. And that's why you're hearing Kamala Harris taking a slightly different tone. But in terms of policy-wise, that will really depend on the pressure not letting up. And no one thinking that just because Joe Biden's off the ticket that things will change.
Right.
There has to be still pressure and a cost to Kamala Harris and the Democrats if they continue Joe Biden's policy.
Yeah, without that pressure, the best the Palestinians are going to get is that they're going to continue to die in huge numbers, suffer uncontrollably and unbelievably, unbearably, but they will be seen and heard. As they do. The empathy will be there. We really feel for them, and we will really say with every stack of billions that we send over that this, just is too much. But I have to say, someone like Walz, I don't know much about him. I only heard of him recently. He's likable.
Yeah.
And it's rare to. One of the things about Sanders is you just kind of liked listening to him because he felt like a stand-up guy. And we're such suckers. We're so emotionally malleable and playable. I am too. I tweeted today, another song reference, but I said, y'all gonna make me slightly feel okay about the Democratic ticket up in here.
Yeah.
Y'all gonna make me overlook temporarily the fact that there'll still be genocidal ghouls up in here. It does something, and the aesthetics do matter. And I gotta say, Kamala is a total blank slate. I think she's a blank something. I mean, I don't trust her at all.
Yep.
But is there something appealing about a woman with a genuine smile and a certain degree of cheerfulness?
I feel it.
And perhaps when she's not in a Selena Meyer Veep role, she'll be able to form some cogent statements. I mean, I wonder if her incoherence was a function. Then again, you go back and look at the videos of her making fun of people who want to defund prisons and build more schools, and you get a sense that there's a real nastiness in there, but she doesn't have a Hillary Clinton callous, cold roboticness to her. So I fucking don't know, but what I'm saying is that I can feel my own strings being pulled by the slightest little machinations. And it's important to keep our eyes on the prize and say exactly what Aaron said. even if we feel better about this ticket, and even if it tips the scales and has me say, yes, okay, the Democrats would be because, I mean, I remember you were saying before the last election that just in terms of foreign policy, in terms of keeping the world from total disaster, and this was Chomsky's line too, the Democrats or Joe Biden is less disastrous than Donald Trump.
And domestically too.
And domestically too. And I don't know what's happened domestically, but foreign policy-wise, I think it's arguable that it's gone the other way.
Yeah, that was
Biden,
wrong. Biden has been a complete threat to the planet in ways that not even Trump would have been, especially because all the neocons in Trump's cabinet the first term, some of them would not have returned.
That's right.
Like John Bolton was already gone, and so I don't think Trump in his second term would have been as dangerous as Trump in his first term. And he would have been terrible, but again, Biden's consciously fueled two
100%
disastrous wars,
or well, as consciously as his consciousness.
Willfully.
He has no conscience, but he increasingly has no consciousness either.
But yeah, so I would not, knowing what I know now about Biden, I wouldn't have made that argument. But is Kamala Harris a devoted warmonger in the way Biden is? No, she's not. I think she's more like in the Obama camp, where she just wants to be liked in Washington. She wants power, obviously, like everyone there, but she's not. It doesn't like define her existence. It doesn't animate her existence to be a warmonger in the way it does for someone like Joe Biden or Mitch McConnell or Lindsey Graham, like those types. Like,
isn't it crazy that we might have a president who hasn't won a single delegate?
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Who hasn't been
very fitting.
Like she couldn't even win her own state, Yeah,
literally,
and she was just a total loser. In that race.
And then she raised a historic, like never seen before amount of money in like 48 hours.
And she dropped out when she was supposed to.
And I'll say this, the people around Biden are the worst people I think ever in a cabinet. Like Antony Blinken's supposed to be a diplomat. He's completely useless. He spends all his time warmongering. Jake Sullivan, right before October 7th, was bragging about how quiet the Middle East is and what a genius the Biden administration has been in keeping the Middle East quiet.
And by far the worst roster of White House press spokespeople, clowns.
It's
Karine Jean-Pierre, Matthew Miller, John Kirby, this Patel guy.
Oh, he's
at the State
worst.
Department.
I've never seen anything like that.
So that's my argument. You can't do worse than these people. You just can't. So anything would be better under, I think, Kamala Harris and Walz. And certainly the movement that's been created doesn't go away, or it could go away, but we could all choose for it not to. And
I hope it doesn't.
Could have an impact.
Yeah.
It could. It did in Michigan with the uncommitted vote. So there's no reason why that couldn't continue.
Tactical pessimism, strategic optimism. Noam Chomsky.
Tactical pessimism, extreme. Strategic.
Optimism.
Say that again.
Short term, long term.
Yes, got it.
You have to be tactically, you have to accept that the days are very dark, but keeping some sense of that another world is possible.
I was thinking about this. Let's end right here with one more question that is way lighter than all these, but that kind of goes into this James Baldwin quote. I saw him this interview that I hadn't seen before. It was a clip of an interview, and the interviewer asks him, "Are you still in despair about the world?" And Baldwin answered, "I have never been in despair about the world. I've been enraged by it, but I don't think I'm in despair. I can't afford despair. I can't tell my nephew, my niece, you can't tell the children there's no hope." And I loved that answer because I constantly am fighting with like despair. And I don't want to. Like, I don't want to go there. And that really gave me some like handles where it's like, oh, I can be fucking enraged at what's happening, and I should be. But I can't lose hope. I brought 3 children into this world that are 9, 10, and 11. They're young. They're way better humans already. Like, they're better humans at 9, 10, 11 than I was until I was like in my 30s. They're incredible, inclusive, and just huge hearts and courageous. I can't tell them that just fuck it. It's over, I guess, because it's either Trump or this war. It's either genocide. I can't do that. So there's like this balance of like, tactical pessimism, strategic optimism. I love that.
One of my favorite quotes, which kind of cuts against that, but I think they could probably work together if held in the right spirit, is from a teacher and friend of mine named Stephen Jenkinson, who's Canadian. And he was talking, I think, about the climate, but really just about the state of the world. And he says, you can tell the young people it's not too late. He's talking to elders now. You can tell the young people it's not too late if you want them to vote for you, but not if you want them to respect you. And that might sound doom and gloom, but there's also something to be said for it's the job of older people to bear faithful witness to the times.
Yes.
And to say this 100%. Is yours now. And to admit it is too late for certain things. Like it's too late for the Yiddish culture of the European Jews to be alive like it was in that it's gone.
Yeah.
It did get obliterated. It's too late for the UN partition plan of 1947. It's too late for the soil of the Holy Land to not be fucking saturated with blood and insanity. That, like certain things are too far gone. And if you can look young people in the face and say, I'm sorry that we've left you this world and I believe in you, and I don't know the solutions. I think that's not despair. I think there's, now I'm not a parent, so I don't have that dilemma. God willing, I will be one day, but I will have to face that horrible dilemma of how do I bring kids into this horrible world. But I think there's something to be said for not giving. I think despair is an abandoning of your own soul, of the stakes of being alive in this thing. And I don't think you want to do that for kids. So I don't know. For me, it's like finding a balance between not telling any lies, but also not laying on the gloom too thick.
Yeah.
I don't fault anybody for feeling hopeless. There's plenty of evidence for it, right? But I love that Baldwin quote because he's just saying, I think I'm going to be responsible for what I can.
Yes.
Which is, we all have our little worlds and we do our best within it to make the change. Even if there's no hope at all, we still do our best. And while still being clear-eyed about all the challenges we face.
I could go on and on. Let's wrap it up. You all have given me, we're way over time. Thank you for not getting up and walking out on me. I really appreciate both of you coming to have this conversation with me. I hope that your first interview together was delightful. I hope you'll do more of it. There's some good energy here. Yeah. I love the banter back and forth that you can only find with siblings, with people that you've known for decades, on end. Thank you both for the work that you do. Keep it up. Again, when I told the few people that I told that I was doing this, and the many, I'm sure I'll get messages as well. We've been so helped by your work. Keep it up. Keep giving a damn. And let's give a damn is here to support the work that you do. So I really appreciate you coming by.